But a repeat of the Concorde, only many years earlier. Well, let's go back. You want to take this airplane, you want to make it go fast. The first supersonic bomber. To do that is pretty obvious. You don't have to be a rocket scientist and a wind tunnel expert to know that the wing is going to have to be thinner than the one on the B-52. And if you make the wing thin, where are you going to put the wheels? Well, if you're going to put them in there, they have to be small. If they get small and you're going 200 knots on takeoff, they're turning up about 4,000 RPM. And if they hit something on the runway or they're not perfect, they start blowing and they start getting down on the rims. An outgrowth of this was what was called a non-frangible wheel. So that when the wheels start breaking up, it go up into the fuel cell, and then fuel would start coming down and rupture. And that's the end result. Here's a hustler in flight. His name is Ray Fitzgerald. It gets awful personal when you know these people. Now you see me, now you don't. And that big one up there, that's the main fuel tank, and the other one, puff, is a res tank, and here's the fallout. That's far too long a story to tell you, but I'll tell you this, that the test pilot was doing exactly what we told him to do. And that makes a difference when you say we. You notice how they always make mistakes, but we are pretty good. I was a part of that. I was a part of it as in the B-58 program, along with the engineers, along with all the people who are in there. They have a moral responsibility if they see something's going on, and sometimes you're just not sharp enough to look ahead. And sometimes if you look ahead and you see it, you don't have the courage to speak up. And I can give you a list of people in programs of B-47. I didn't stop there to tell you about Floyd Brown, but I have about 6, 8, or 10 fellows that I know that I think of every day of my life. And I think that if any one of us who had the key information and would have stepped in and say, he should not go out to Mach 2 and do an engine chop until we've done 1.4 and 1.7 and then look at that data. But remember, this is in the late 40s and early 50s, and we're going fast. We're moving. And sometimes we run when we should be walking. And sometimes we walk when we should be standing still. Anyhow, the Hustler was one challenging program. After that, I think we started to looking about the combination of good leadership and good management. I saw a sign on a hospital door the other day. For a moment I started to laugh. I thought it was an oxymoron. It said quality management. But I believe that with servant leadership and quality management, you can do anything. And I have a feeling I know a little bit about it because I worked on a farm as a kid, and we were poor managers. We'd take our savings and put them in a can and hide them someplace. We were not very good managers. But I've seen excess management, and I've seen superb leadership, and I have the hope that with servant leadership and quality management that we can accomplish anything. Well, this is a program that could just about accomplish anything. Move on out to Edwards, to the X-15 program. Ooh, 10 years. 10 years and out to 4.6 Mach number. Let's see, the day with 3 October 67, 6.7, 4,520 mile an hour with Pete Knight. And flying the mothership and being on that program with NASA and there's a X-15 on its way. Here's the Valkyrie on rollout. We didn't have any problems during rollout. There's the first takeoff, and that's when the problem started. Well, wait a minute. I didn't complain. I left home looking for excitement and adventure. And believe me, that airplane gave us a lot of excitement and adventure. On the first flight on that airplane, couldn't get the gear up. We're supposed to go supersonic. The contract said go supersonic on the first flight. The airplane hadn't heard that. So the gear wouldn't come up. One of the engines ran away because a ball bearing came loose in a fuel control, shut an engine down, and caught fire on landing. And that was the introduction. That was the start of problems. And if you're going to ground loop an airplane like the Valkyrie, choose a lake bed to do it on. And if you want to know why, it's because one of the bogies didn't unfold properly. And if you want to know how Al White and I, Van Shepard in that case, Van Shepard and myself looked at, in many of the cases, that's kind of the way that we felt. Well, let me look. As per usual, I've run over my time. I've got that many slides I brought along in case anybody wants to stay and has special questions about anything like you heard there was landing gear problems in addition to that, or skin came off of the airplane, or what have you. We had one mission which was a lot like, well, two missions, a lot like Apollo 13 in a way, in an airplane. But I vowed I wasn't going to run over on time. And it's been a joy.
Keep going.
Okay?
Keep going.
Well, I want to make sure, because if anybody needs to leave.
Let's make sure. How many of you want to hear Joe go on?
Yeah!
There we go.
I'm going to need some help, and I want you to put that on number 52. You have a push button over on the right-hand side. Take a lot of reports and go through them. What I can cover real quick. Now these are the kind of when you get down and the pilots walk around and you have a look at it, you say, how about that? A bunch of the skin come off the airplane. Keep in mind now, there's honeycomb and there's stainless steel over it, and there's a half an acre of it. So it's pretty hard not to have at least a few dents in the skin. But this one was 10 feet long and about 18 inches wide, and it came off of the leading edge at Mach 3. And you'd say, could you tell it? And I'd say, could you tell if you woke up with an elephant in bed with you? That's how evident it was. Then here is a big one. This is the apex of the wing, right up where the wing starts. And in the wind tunnel, a lot of these are things I show us why you have test pilots and why you test airplanes before you put people in them. And that apex in the wind tunnel test showed always an upload, never a download. But when it really got out there in the real world, it had a download, and that apex came off and shed and went down the inlet. And you see it there it is, the real one, not the artist's drawing. But it goes down, and those are the engines, 3 of the 6 engines, and one of the dividers there has a piece of it the size of a tire iron. That's H11 steel. I think about 360,000 pounds per square inch tensile strength. And those engines kept going. Had 2 of them shut down at one time, and then it relit, number 4 relit, and really made the difference of bringing the airplane in. But there you can see what that stainless steel going through and hitting the compressor, what it did. One day, I didn't bring along the junction box, but in a junction box on the landing gear bogie, the insulation had been worn off, and we got a short to ground, and really because inspecting it too frequently, and you might say, and we kind of looked at it that way, take it off and put it back on, take it off and put it back on to see that everything looked okay in that junction box, but then really didn't look close enough to see that it was frayed insulation. And the result was that just after takeoff, the electrical system was lost to the gear, and the gear relaxed and went back into the nose part, blew the tire, and locked up. And therefore, even though you had 4,000 psi hydraulic pressure, you could not get it down because a sequence valve said, do not let the gear operate if there's a door in the way. The door has to be open or closed. So the idea was, and here's why I'm in love with an engineer. I'm just an old farm boy away from home that loved airplanes, and I was never an engineer. I only worked in a sorghum factory. And but the guys on the ground, we had a lot of fuel, and we had some imagination, and we had a lot of time, and they said, if we could figure a way to jumper around that sequence valve, we could make it believe that the door is in fact out of the way, and you can get the handle down, get the hydraulic pressure to it, and get the gear. Take about an hour and a half with the proper drawings, but what we went about doing is, you say, why didn't you jump from pin 42 to pin 37? Because the pin numbers are on the back side, and you can't get in the back side of a junction box. So we went about making our own blueprint, so to speak, taking a paper clip, actually a neck of a paper clip, and taking an insulator off of the lap belt, and jumpering from dark point 1 to dark point 2, put the gear handle down, and that was the end result. We came in and landed and caught fire again. After that, we had lost power to the brakes. The brakes had a constant modulating anti-skid system so that they were electrically powered on and off to be fast enough to stop the airplane. Didn't have any return springs. No manual return springs for this airplane. Not until after the electric super system failed twice and you caught fire. And the next flight, we're back to manual return springs. That's a thing that a lot of people don't understand, or the story doesn't get through, that research and development, oftentimes the new idea won't work, and you go back to the old. And sure, it costs you time, and it sometimes costs you equipment and costs you lives. But that's some of the deep stories of research and development. And that is kind of the way we were getting after we had a lot of irritation. We were patient, but test pilots can also be, there's a hate-love relationship between the test pilot and the contractor. And sometimes when you get fed up, you get pretty hard-nosed. Real quick, how do you get to Mach 3 with a heavy airplane like this? You don't just go up and level off at 25 or what have you. You just try to turn some potential energy into kinetic energy and break through, so you climb on up and dive down and accelerate. And there's a racetrack we used for a long time, just north, and turn around and head home. It kept us close to dry lake beds. And then this is a track that we use very often. You say, what was the Valkyrie supposed to do? It was supposed to be an RS-70. It was to be a recon strike. It would go across and look at a target complex and say, well, they did well on number 1, number 2, but number 3 they didn't get on the last sweep through, and so release the weapon and strike and send him on back to hit the other complex. This is to show you some of the lighter part of it. People from Idaho used to come to Edwards, and they fell in love with the Valkyrie program because we were flying up over Idaho, and so we thought to show our appreciation, we'd put something on board for them on the first flight, Mach 3. And went down the Safeway and got 2 5-pound bags of potatoes. And they were on board on the Valkyrie's first Mach 3 flight, then went up to Burley, Idaho, and gave 5 pounds of them to the mayor and 5 pounds to Lieutenant Governor Drevlo. Here you see the Valkyrie and the X-15 painted white. And this shows you, say, what's it like flying the airplane with a passenger if it was an SST. I'll guarantee you wouldn't put first-class passengers up in front because the canard up front and riding on the ground up front, you could tell it in the cockpit, and everybody liked to know how the ejection seat worked and how you encapsulated and what have you. And I wouldn't for anything give a presentation like this without letting you know about the worst day of our program, a mid-air collision. And that shows the 104 in flames behind the Valkyrie.
Which plane there were you flying, Joe? In that last...
Say again?
In that slide, which aircraft is you?
On the left, the very one on the, this one the closest to us, on near me.
Okay.
And
What did the 104 strike? The B-70.
the B-70, the right wingtip, and then went across and took off the verticals. That severed the hydraulic lines, and lost Joe Walker from NASA and Carl Cross in the Air Force. And I'll just briefly want to tell you that when you're involved deeply and you're under investigation and what, I had known that the truth will set you free ever since I left home on my farm in Indiana, but I never knew in my life how the truth will set you free until you go through something like this. You tell one story, and the simple story was that, were you ever asked about this mission? And I said, yes. And they said, who asked? I said, General Electric asked if they could have a photo mission at the, like we'd done on the North American Saberliner once before, and I said yes. I don't know how many people after I said yes. To me, that's not important. I know that I could have been the first one to say no. Now, once you tell that story, you don't have to ever tell any other story ever again. So I didn't come here, and I've told people when I show this picture, I didn't come here to set the record straight. The record is straight. And there is no cover-up. And what penalty do you pay? You think of those dear friends every day of your life. Now, I've often thought that at my age, the thing that I appreciate more than anything is that tremendous level of appreciation. I appreciate everything. Food, clothes, the cars I drive, the road I ride on, everything about my family, my home, I have an exceptional appreciation. And I think the distance between the highs and the lows in your life are a measure of your appreciation. The lower you've been, to the higher you've been makes a greater appreciation. Robbie Reisner, 7.5 years in the Hanoi Hilton. Robbie tells me that is his greatest surprise at 80, is his appreciation level. Roberto Benigni, who went from poverty in Italy to being a producer and an actor, his appreciation level is unbelievable. And one day you're at 70,000 feet in Mach 3 in a Valkyrie, and a few days later you're standing in the desert in the midst of the rubble. You've lost 2 friends and your flying buddy is in the hospital. That's about as high and as low as you can go. And that's why I say that the airplane, aviation, and its people have taught me about everything that I know. And I'm proud to be asked to be here to tell you about it. Thanks a lot.
Good, thank you. Joe, I had the pleasure of being here when you talked a year ago, and I thought that was just an incredible talk that you gave then. But I'll say that I think you topped it again, and it was just an incredible talk tonight, and we surely appreciate your coming here and talking to us. So I'd like to, as just a show our appreciation, just to give you this, if I can get it out, this certificate of appreciation to you, Joe.
Hey,
Thank you so much. Will everybody help clean up, and the meeting's adjourned.